everyone. So today we are going to discuss Jainism and my first impression of Jainism. Now, Jainism is a religion or a spirituality out of India. It mainly focuses on nonviolence and escaping karma and escaping rebirth. Achieving moksha so that we're not reborn again and again and again and have to suffer here on this earth again and again and again. Now, stopping karma, not accumulating any more karma, is more about intention. It's not about stopping action itself. It's not about not acting. It's basically about your intention behind the actions that you do. In Jainism, it feels like you can worship many different gods. You can look up to the divine in different forms. But there is a set route by which you can escape this constant rebirth cycle, this constant pain that we feel as human beings. And in Jainism, there are four types of beings, four main types, that accumulate karma. 1, hellish beings. 2, animal beings. 3, human beings. And 4, heavenly beings. Plants can't really accumulate karma. They don't really choose to act as much as these other forms of beings do. And if we're an especially bad human, we might be born as an animal. Or if we're a very bad human, we might be born as a hellish being. You get the sense that even if you're born as a heavenly being, after doing many great things as a human being, then that isn't permanent. Mahavir, the founder of Jainism, the number one saint, I guess you could say, that epitomizes the spirituality. He was considered higher than the gods, and the gods actually showed him respect. Now, there are some interesting ideas in Jainism that don't exist in Hinduism or Buddhism. It had a relationship with Hinduism and Buddhism, way back hundreds and hundreds of years ago, because Buddhism and Jainism were very close in their founding, as far as what year. Buddhism and Jainism kind of had a bit of a competition in India to see which one would win out, as well as with the traditional Brahminic religion that is Hinduism, or at least a section of Hinduism. I am Hindu myself, but there are a few things about Jainism that struck me. And the two books I'm going to be talking about are, one is by Forgotten Books, Jainism, Short Essays on Jain Philosophy. And this one is very basic. It doesn't have a lot of pages. I think it has about 60 pages. I think I've read about 30. And it's by Anonymous, basically, because it's Forgotten Books, and they're not really into making a lot of money off of it. It's just short essays on the philosophy of Jainism. But one thing in this book that I like to go over is, there are very strict vows monks have to take. They can't have any property. They can't, they of course can't eat anything else but, anything as a product of plants. They have to be completely chaste. They have to spend most of their time in meditation or in thought, and so forth. But what I really wanted to read is the 12 vows of lay people, of lay persons. So, now, when I say lay people, a lot of people listening to this will know what I'm talking about. It's the ones who haven't really taken the vows of a monk. For instance, it's the same in Buddhism and in Christianity a lot of times. It's the ones who haven't taken the vow to be a monk, but you support the monks and you're working your way to a greater stage of enlightenment that you eventually become a monk, maybe not in this life, but the next. And in Jainism, it seems like the whole process is just preparing you for that asceticism, of renouncing everything. A lot of Jain sadhus actually don't wear any clothes at all. They basically go around sky-clad, and that's why they might stay in certain areas and not go beyond them, because they might not be welcome because they don't have any clothes on. But here are and I didn't really go over monks very much just now. I just listed a few things, so don't think that that's all there is to being a Jain monk. So, as a layperson, a Jainism follower, number one of the vows is nonviolence. Now, this vow basically pertains to any living being. And it's not just outward action, but it's also thought, word, and deed that make up nonviolence. For instance, if you think something violently about somebody, it will more than likely become something that you act out either in this life or the next. So it's about working on your own thinking as well as seeing life in all living things. So, and not wanting to cause harm, and even if you have to, even if you fight in to defend your land, as you can actually do in Jainism, you can't do it with anger. You have to do it with complete detachment, and detachment is a very big part of Jainism. I'd say it's the biggest part of Jainism, because you get this feeling that the world and the universe is going through these cycles, and we're tossed back and forth, and we're constantly accumulating karma based on our actions, our wants and desires. Jainism is about getting rid of those wants and desires, something that you desire or have an aversion to. So if you're attracted or have an aversion to something, you want to try to lessen both those things, in fact, in order to escape these universal cycles of constantly being new beings and then going to other beings. And, we slowly realize things, but sometimes we fall a bit back. So that's nonviolence. I'm just going to briefly mention a lot of these. Truthfulness. Basically, not telling a lie, not slandering somebody, not even gossiping behind people's backs. Another vow is non-stealing. Basically, don't steal things. If you're trusted with property, don't damage it, don't steal it. If you're at your job, don't steal things from your job, even if it's easy. Chastity, even the vow of chastity is one for lay people, where you don't basically you don't have sex all the time. You don't, it doesn't become a part of your relationship with your spouse. It's more of, every now and then, and mostly to produce children, but, very limited sexual activity, and definitely nobody you're not married to. Non-possession. Now, as long as a person does not know the richness of joy and peace that comes from within, he tries to fill his empty and insecure existence with the clutter of material acquisitions. And there's another quote in this book that I actually wanted to share, and it is, the purpose of acquisition is for redistribution, or is for distribution, among people who don't have things. So there's this, and there's other senses within this book that you get a very socialist idea, which I'm not opposed to. It's just, this book actually says it's very socialist, because the only reason you would acquire things is to distribute them equally among your fellow Jainists, and among the world, really. You shouldn't have more than you really need, and if somebody has much less than you, of course you should give them things. That's one of the Jainist philosophies. Now, limited area of activity vow. This one is something that I think is very interesting. So, limited area of activity vow. When I read this, it was hard for me to understand, but I think I got used to it. Was that, if you are within this certain area, your village, your city, your town, then you have these, what's called, these vows are like limited sins. Like, you can still do these certain things in these vows, but if you go beyond the border of your town, your city, what have you, then you take up the more serious vows. So this leaves room for limited sin in a way, and the ultimate vows of a monk leave no room. So if you go beyond, be ready to be a monk. If you travel, be ready to be a complete ascetic. So this might seem very confining to where you live. That talk of limited sins within the area of activity. So the next vow is limited use of consumable/non-consumable items. So if you're going to eat, of course we're going to eat food. So make sure that you know not to eat animals, not to excessively eat even plants. The idea is that these limited consumables, which you're only going to use once, which is food, you don't eat more than you have to. And you don't eat things that cause a disturbance within your karma, like eating an animal. And the non-consumable vow is the ones that you have, like furniture, you have like a bed or something like that you only really turn over and get another one if it's completely destroyed, and you give away a lot of your, let's say, furniture. You don't need a whole lot. This may seem very daunting and very limiting as far as our life in the Western world especially, but through the sense of all these vows and Jainism in general, I start to feel like they're just telling you what you should do in order to escape this constant rebirth and this constant cycle of life and death and misery. And if you don't do it, I mean, that's on you. It's not saying that you're going to go to hell, but these are ways that'll help you achieve moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirth. So, avoidance of purposeless sins vow. Don't do purposeless sins. Thinking, talking, or preaching evil or ill to others. Doing inconsiderate or useless acts such as walking on the grass unnecessarily because you might actually kill bugs, which you don't have to do. Manufacturing or supplying arms for attack, not defense. Notice that it said attack. You can defend in Jainism if you can defend your town and your city. Reading or listening improper literature or carelessness in ordinary behavior. Don't read the wrong books, don't listen to the wrong music that encourages violence, that encourages negativity, that encourages you to be something that is not maintainable and something that is limiting to this world and not allowing you to go beyond this world. So it makes life more vigilant and sin-proof. Limited meditation vow. So you meditate at least 45 minutes each day. And meditation in Jainism, it seems like, can be reading a religious book or spiritual book. It can be literally meditating. It can be trying to think about the world and your relation to it. There's a lot of things that go into what you can do in meditation for a Jain person. Now, you can do this 45 minutes, but you should do it multiple times a day if you feel the need. 48 minutes a day is okay, though, according to this book. Limited duration of activity vow. You shouldn't be active outdoors beyond a certain time, so that you are indoors reflecting upon yourself, helping your family, doing things that would aid your family, and not carelessly, just being active outside for no reason, or even active inside for no reason. Always have a purpose to your action. Limited ascetics life vow. So, be an ascetic in a way when you can, how you can. Every now and then you might want to completely take to being an ascetic, and that will help your spiritual path. Limited charity vow, trying to be as charitable as possible. It kind of goes into that as well. Peaceful death. In the final days of life, a householder observes peaceful death. The householder can attain a peaceful death if he truly follows above 12 vows. The peaceful death is characterized by non-attachment to worldly objects and by a suppression of the passions at the time of death. The last thought should be a calm renunciation of the body, and this thought should ever be present long before death supervenes. Okay, so that's enough from this book. I just wanted to read those vows of a lay person so that you can get a general idea of it. This book I actually received today. This book is The Forest of Thieves and the Magic Garden, an anthology of medieval Jain stories. And this got a lot of good reviews on Amazon. I got both these books from Amazon. And these stories, they're from the medieval period, I think 1100 to 1400, if I'm right. And these are supposed to be really good stories, like Buddhists have stories that help you inspire you towards the spiritual path. These are supposed to be really good stories for doing that with Jainism, conquering basically pleasure and desire and going towards virtue. That's what Jainism is all about, so that you can escape this cycle of rebirth again and again and again, and all this suffering that you have as a living being, and achieve that oneness beyond confinement within bodies. So there's a lot of stories in here. They pertain mainly to conquering pleasure and achieving moksha, or renouncing the world as well, especially. So I'll go ahead and read the introduction, and I think I'll be able to get through a couple pages at least of the introduction without making this video too long. Yeah, I'll go ahead and read that from this book once again, The Forest of Thieves and the Magic Garden, an anthology of medieval Jain stories. Once again by Penguin Classics. So, here we go. Blessed One, how can I make my way safely through the forest that is the cycle of rebirths? And once I cross the forest, where will I be? The monk replied, listen, there are two forests. One is the forest that exists outside us, in nature, and the other forest is the forest that exists, that is within us, the tangle of our thoughts and desires. Let me use the forest that exists in nature as a parable to teach you of that other. Equally treacherous forest. Imagine there was a merchant who wanted to go from one city to another. He announces to all and sundry, I seek someone to accompany me to the city such and such. I will make sure that no harm befalls him on the journey as long as he follows my advice. When they hear this announcement, many merchants hasten to join him. Before they depart, the merchant describes to them the conditions of the road that they must travel. My friends, my traveling companions, he begins, there are two paths to choose from. One is straight, but other is somewhat tortuous. Believe it or not, it is easier to follow the crooked path eventually. It leads one onto the straight way and to the city we seek. The straight path is harder to travel. Although it leads to the goal more quickly, it is dangerous and arduous. For as soon as one enters the straight path, there lie in wait for him terrifying creatures, lions and tigers, that obstruct his way to the city he seeks. They pursue him until he reaches the city that is the object of his desires. They kill the person who steps off the path, even for a moment, but they cannot harm the one who keeps to the right road. There is an explanation for the parable. The merchant is the noble Jinnah, honored by gods and anti-gods, the crest jewel of the universe. His proclamation is his teaching of the Jain doctrine through various techniques, telling stories that attract the listener to the Jain doctrine and turn the listener away from false doctrines, telling stories that cause the listener to feel disgust for worldly existence and delight in the religious life. The travelers are the souls who set out for the city of liberation, making their way across the forest of transmigratory existence. The forest is the entire circle of rebirths, which includes births in hell as animals, humans, and gods. The straight path is the way of the renunciate, the path that is slightly crooked in the way of the lay practitioner. In the end, it leads onto the path of renunciation. The city that is the object of the traveler's desires is a city of peace, of final release, which is devoid of the torments of birth, old age, death, disease, grief, and the like. The tigers and lions are the destructive passions, such as lust, pride, greed, delusion, and anger, all of which are obstructions to the attainment of liberation. Okay, so I'm not going to go any farther in that book because I don't want to make this video too long, but listen, Jainism is, at first it seemed foreign to me, but there was something in my mind, there was something within me that made me remember. Like, I felt like there was a deja vu moment of something not that I experienced in this life, but in another life. And I've always been curious about how to escape rebirth and pain and suffering. Since I was a little kid, I started studying Buddhism for that exact reason when I was 8 years old. And there's a lot of things in this that are in Jainism that are very similar to Buddhism. Escaping suffering. And really, it just shows you the path and urges you to take it. It's not about calling you an evil person if you don't. That would be a negative thought towards another human being, maybe even violent thought, if you thought violent thoughts towards somebody else because they weren't following the path, which is not what Jainism is about. So, in conclusion, if Jainism is interesting to you at all, please seek it. It's hard to find books about it. It's hard to find organizations that are Jainists. Most Jains are in India, and they're in the millions, but not very many millions. I think it was about 3 million Jains in India. I could be wrong. But it's a very small population, especially considered to the grander Hindu population. And many Jains might consider themselves Hindu for sake of convenience. But hey, I thank you very much for watching. If you're Jain and you're watching this, feel free to correct me. Feel free to say, no, it's about this or that. And please accept my apology that I'm new to this and these are just my first impressions. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope to see all of you on the channel in the future.